Dr. Elena Vasquez stared out the window of the research ship Xenophage as it approached the massive space station. Nexus Prime stretched across the darkness like a metal city floating in space. Lights twinkled from thousands of windows, and ships moved around it like tiny insects. "First time seeing anything this big," said Colonel James Chen, standing beside her. His military uniform was crisp and clean, ready for their important meeting. "The whole thing is bigger than most countries on Earth," replied Dr. Yuki Tanaka from her seat nearby. She was studying data on her tablet about the alien species they would meet. Hard to believe so many different kinds of beings live together in one place. Lieutenant Sarah Walsh looked up from her communication equipment. "I'm getting strange readings from their signals. It's like they're using extra security protocols just for us. Much more than normal first contact procedures." Elena nodded. As the leader of humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council, she felt the weight of representing their entire species. Earth had received the invitation to join the galactic community only 6 months ago. It came as a complete surprise since humans had never detected any alien signals before. The docking process took longer than expected. Their ship was guided through several security checkpoints, each one more thorough than the last. Elena found it odd but assumed it was normal procedure. When the airlock finally opened, they were greeted by a being unlike anything they had ever seen. Ambassador Kethavar looked like a walking crystal sculpture. Light moved through its transparent body in patterns that seemed to match its speech. "Welcome, honored humans," Kethavar said, its voice sounding like wind chimes. "I am your assigned liaison for your stay on Nexus Prime." Elena stepped forward and extended her hand in greeting. Kethavar looked at the offered hand for a long moment before carefully reaching out with what appeared to be its own crystalline appendage. The handshake lasted only a second before Kethavar quickly pulled away. "Please follow me," Kethavar said. "The High Chancellor is eager to meet you." As they walked through the corridors of the station, Elena noticed something strange. Every alien they passed stopped what they were doing to stare at the human group. But it was not the curious staring she expected. These beings looked nervous, even frightened. Some moved quickly to the other side of the corridor to avoid getting too close. "Is everything all right?" Elena asked Kethavar. The other beings seemed uncomfortable. Kethavar's crystal body flickered with rapid light patterns. "They are simply excited to see new species. It has been a long time since anyone new joined the council." Colonel Chen caught Elena's eye and raised an eyebrow. His military training made him notice things others might miss. The aliens were not excited. They were afraid. The group passed through a security checkpoint where they had to walk through scanning devices. Elena noticed that they were the only ones being scanned. Other aliens passed freely without any checks. "More security?" she asked. "Standard procedure for new members," Kethavar replied quickly. "Nothing to worry about." The main council chamber was enormous. Elena had to tilt her head back to see the ceiling. Thousands of different alien species filled the seats in circles that went up higher than she could count. The noise of so many different voices speaking at once was overwhelming. At the center of the chamber, a massive creature sat on what looked like a throne made of living coral. High Chancellor Zixthul had tentacles as thick as tree trunks and eyes the size of dinner plates. When it spoke, its voice boomed through the chamber without any need for amplification. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the Chancellor said. "Your arrival marks a special day in galactic history." Elena stepped forward. "Thank you, High Chancellor. We are honored to be here and excited to learn about the galactic community." "Indeed," the Chancellor replied. "Your species has been granted membership under very special circumstances. We have fast-tracked your admission under what we call the Preservation Protocol." Elena glanced at her team. They had never heard of any preservation protocol in their briefings. "Could you tell us more about this protocol?" Elena asked. The Chancellor's tentacles moved in what might have been nervous gestures. "All will be explained during your cultural integration period. For now you must be tired from your journey. Ambassador Kethavar will show you to your quarters." Elena wanted to ask more questions, but it was clear the meeting was over. The Chancellor had already turned to speak with other council members, Their quarters were unlike anything they had expected. Instead of simple rooms, they were given an entire section of the station. The apartments were luxurious with soft furniture, beautiful decorations, and large windows showing the stars outside. "This is incredibly generous," Dr. Tanaka said as she explored her assigned room. "Much nicer than what most diplomats usually get." "Too generous," Colonel Chen said quietly to Elena. "Something is not right here. Did you see how that chancellor reacted when you asked about the protocol?" Elena nodded. "And why does everyone seem so nervous around us? It is like they are afraid we might do something terrible." Lieutenant Walsh was setting up her communication equipment in the common area. "I'm trying to access the station's database to learn more about their customs. Maybe that will help us understand what is happening." "Be careful," Elena warned. "We don't want to seem like we are spying on our hosts." Over the next few days, the strange behavior continued. Whenever they left their quarters, they were always accompanied by guards. Kethvar called them cultural guides, but Elena noticed they were heavily armed. The humans were given tours of certain parts of the station, but many areas were off limits. When they asked to visit the scientific research sections or the military command centers, they were politely told those areas were not suitable for cultural exchange. During meals in the diplomatic dining hall, Elena noticed that other alien species would stop talking when humans approached. Conversations would resume only after the humans had moved away. It was as if their presence made everyone uncomfortable. Dr. Tanaka spent most of her time in the biological research lab they had been assigned. She was excited to study alien life forms, but she noticed that all her requests to examine certain specimens were denied. She was only allowed to study what the aliens specifically chose to show her. "It is like they are hiding something," she told Elena one evening. "Every species I have been allowed to study shows signs of genetic modification, but I cannot figure out why." Colonel Chen had been observing the station's security procedures. "Their defenses are not designed to keep invaders out," he reported. "They are designed to contain something inside. The weapons systems all point inward toward the living areas." Lieutenant Walsh had made the most progress with the station's computer systems. "I have been able to access some basic files," she said. "But there are huge sections of the database that are completely sealed off. Whatever they are hiding, they really do not want us to see it." Elena felt frustrated. They had come to learn about galactic civilization and to represent humanity in a positive way. Instead, they were being treated like dangerous prisoners who needed to be carefully watched and controlled. That night, as she looked out her window at the stars, Elena wondered what humanity had done to deserve such treatment. They had never met aliens before, so they could not have offended anyone. Yet every alien they encountered treated them with a mixture of fear and forced politeness. Tomorrow, she decided, she would demand answers. The truth about the preservation protocol, about why humans were being treated differently, and about what the aliens were so afraid of. Humanity deserved to know why they were being kept in a golden cage among the stars. Little did Elena know that the answers she sought would change everything she believed about her species and their place in the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at Nexus Prime, and Elena was growing more suspicious with each day. Every request they made was met with polite delays. Every question about galactic history received vague answers. Most disturbing of all, they were never allowed to go anywhere without their armed escorts. "We are supposed to be diplomats, not prisoners," Colonel Chen said during their morning meeting. "Yesterday I counted 12 guards following us to the dining hall. 12 armed guards just to escort 4 humans to lunch." Dr. Tanaka looked up from her research notes. "I think I am starting to understand why they are so nervous around us. Every alien species I have studied shows evidence of extensive genetic changes. Not improvements, but repairs. It is like their entire genetic structure was damaged and then rebuilt." "What kind of damage?" Elena asked. "The kind that comes from extreme trauma, cellular scarring, redundant organ systems, built-in biological limiters that prevent certain types of stress responses. It is like someone took healthy species and surgically removed their ability to feel certain emotions." Lieutenant Walsh had been working quietly at her computer terminal. She suddenly looked up with excitement and fear in her eyes. "I found something," she whispered. "I managed to access a restricted file in their historical database. You need to see this." She turned her screen so the others could view it. The file was titled, "The Great Dying, Classification Level, Absolute Secret." Elena read the opening paragraph aloud. Galactic Standard Date 47,132 BCE. The species designated as the predecessors began systematic extermination of all galactic civilizations. Current casualty estimates place total death toll at 94.7% of all sentient life in the galaxy. The room fell silent. Colonel Chen was the first to speak. 47,000 years ago? What does this have to do with us? Sarah continued scrolling through the file. Look at this section about the predecessor's physical description. Bipedal species, average height 1.8 meters, 5-digit manipulator appendages, forward-facing optical sensors, minimal body hair, remarkable adaptability to different environments. Dr. Tanaka went pale. That description matches humans perfectly. Elena felt her stomach turn cold. Keep reading. The file contained detailed records of something called the War of Extinction. The predecessors had not simply conquered other species. They had systematically destroyed them in ways that seemed designed to cause maximum suffering. They used psychological warfare that drove entire populations to madness. They created weapons that could sterilize whole solar systems. Most horrifying of all, they seemed to take pleasure in the pain they caused. Listen to this part, Sarah said, her voice shaking. The predecessors showed creativity and destruction that suggested they viewed warfare as an art form. They would capture enemy leaders and torture them publicly, not for information, but for entertainment. They turned conquered worlds into massive prison camps where survivors were forced to fight each other for food. Colonel Chen read over her shoulder. It gets worse. Unlike previous conflicts, the predecessors fought not just to win territory or resources, but to erase. They showed no interest in ruling conquered species, they simply wanted them gone. Dr. Tanaka was frantically taking notes. This explains everything. The genetic modifications, the fear, the way they treat us. They think we are related to these predecessors. Elena felt sick. Are we? Sarah scrolled to the end of the file. According to this, the predecessors were finally driven back to their home system after centuries of warfare. The surviving galactic species built an energy barrier around their entire solar system to contain them. The system was designated as Sol in their records. The room went completely quiet. Sol was the name of Earth's solar system. We need to confront them about this, Elena said finally. We need to know the truth. That evening, Elena requested an immediate meeting with Ambassador Kethvar. The crystal being arrived within minutes, accompanied by twice the usual number of guards. You wish to speak with me? Kethvar asked. Its light patterns seemed more rapid and chaotic than usual. We found the files about the Great Dying, Elena said directly. We know about the predecessors. We know you think we are related to them. Kethvar's entire body went dark for several seconds. When light returned, it pulsed in slow, sad patterns. Had hoped you would not discover this so soon, Kethvar said. Yes, we believe modern humans are descendants of the predecessors. The genetic match is 99.7% identical. Colonel Chen stepped forward. That was 50,000 years ago. We are not the same species that did those things. Are you not? Kethvar asked. Your species has a history of warfare, conquest, and cruelty that spans your entire recorded history. Every few decades, you create new and more efficient ways to kill each other. You have weapons that could destroy your entire planet several times over. Dr. Tanaka tried to defend humanity. But we have also created art, music, literature. We help each other during disasters. We have laws to protect the weak. Kethvar's light patterns shifted to what Elena was learning to recognize as sadness. The predecessors also created beautiful things between their campaigns of destruction. They were not mindless monsters. They were intelligent, creative, and capable of love. That made them even more terrifying when they chose violence. Elena, felt the weight of galactic history pressing down on her. So what happens now? Are you going to imprison us? Execute us? What is the preservation protocol really about? Kethvar moved closer, its crystal body reflecting the room's lights. The preservation protocol was created by the survivors of the Great Dying. It states that any species genetically related to the predecessors must be protected and appeased at all costs. Protected from what? From becoming what their ancestors were. The theory is that if we keep your species comfortable and happy, you will not revert to your predecessor nature. If we give you everything you want, you will have no reason to become violent. Colonel Chen understood first. You are not protecting the galaxy from us. You are trying to protect us from ourselves. Exactly. But there is another part of the protocol you do not know about. If we ever determine that your species is returning to its predecessor behaviors, if you show signs of becoming a threat to galactic peace, then we have authorization to use any means necessary to prevent another Great Dying. Elena felt cold. Including wiping out humanity completely? Kethvar's lights pulsed once, very slowly. The protocol is clear. Better to sacrifice one species than to lose all life in the galaxy again. Dr. Tanaka was studying her tablet frantically. Kethvar, I need to ask you something important. Have you done genetic testing on modern humans compared to the predecessors? Of course. That is how we confirmed your relationship to them. What were the results? Not just the similarity, but the differences. Kethvar seemed confused by the question. There are minor evolutionary changes as expected after 50,000 years of separate development. But what about aggression markers, stress hormones, fight-or-flight responses? I do not understand why this matters. Dr. Tanaka's face had gone white. Because according to my analysis of human genetics compared to what you have shown me of, other species modern humans actually have higher levels of natural aggression markers than the predecessors had. The room went dead silent. That is impossible, Kethvar said. If that were true, you would be even more dangerous than your ancestors. Unless, Elena said slowly, the difference is not in our biology, but in our choices. Maybe the predecessors were not evil because they were genetically programmed to be violent. Maybe they became evil because of what happened to them. Kethvar's light patterns became rapid and chaotic. What are you suggesting? Elena looked at her team, then back at the alien ambassador. I think we need to know the whole story about the predecessors, not just what they did, but why they did it. Because if we are going to live under this protocol, we deserve to know the complete truth about our ancestors. Kethvar was quiet for a long time. Finally, its lights pulsed in a pattern Elena had never seen before. That truth may be more terrible than you can imagine, Kethvar said. And once you know it, everything changes. The next morning, Kethvar arrived at the human quarters with a security detail twice as large as usual. Elena noticed that several of the guards belonged to species she had not seen before. These new aliens carried weapons that hummed with energy and wore armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. If you truly wish to know the complete history of the predecessors, Kethvar said, then we must go to the Archive of Sorrows. It is a place where the survivors of the Great Dying recorded everything they remembered about that time. Colonel Chen studied the heavily armed escort. And we need all these guards to visit an archive? The archive is located in the restricted sector, Kethvar explained. No organic being has visited it in over 2,000 years. The records are maintained by artificial intelligences because living creatures find the contents too disturbing to process. They traveled through parts of Nexus Prime that Elena had never seen before. The corridors here were darker, older, and covered with symbols that seemed to shift when she was not looking directly at them. The walls themselves appeared to be made of some black material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. This section of the station was built by the survivors immediately after the Great Dying, Kethvar said as they walked. It serves as both a memorial and a warning. Every species in the galaxy is required to send representatives here once per generation to remember what happened. They passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one more advanced than the last. Elena noticed that the scanners were not just checking for weapons. They seemed to be analyzing the humans' emotional states, stress levels, and even brain activity. What exactly are they looking for? Dr. Tanaka asked. Signs of aggressive intent, Keithfar replied. The archive contains information that could be used to recreate some of the weapons used during the Great Dying. We must be certain that visitors have peaceful intentions. The archive itself was a massive spherical chamber, with walls covered in displays showing images, videos, and documents. At the center of the room stood a holographic projection system that could create three-dimensional recreations of historical events. Computer, Keithfar said to the empty air, activate historical records for the predecessor war. Begin with the first contact protocols. A mechanical voice responded from hidden speakers. Warning. The requested historical records contain disturbing content related to species extinction events. Are you certain you wish to proceed? We are certain, Elena said. The lights dimmed, and holographic images began to appear around them. Elena found herself standing in what appeared to be a recreation of a first contact scenario from 50,000 years ago. The early galactic civilization was very different from what she had seen on Nexus Prime. These ancient aliens moved with confidence and joy. They built beautiful cities on dozens of worlds and traveled freely between star systems. Most importantly, they seemed genuinely excited about discovering new species and sharing knowledge. The galaxy was a much different place then, the computer narrated. Over 300 sentient species worked together in what was called the Great Alliance. They had eliminated war, poverty, and disease from most of their worlds. The scene changed to show the first contact between the Alliance and the predecessors. Elena watched as human-looking beings stepped out of primitive spacecraft to meet a delegation of various alien species. The humans looked tired, dirty, and desperate. The predecessors arrived in damaged ships carrying approximately 50,000 survivors, the computer continued. They claimed their homeworld had been destroyed in a natural disaster and begged for refuge. Elena watched as the Alliance aliens welcomed the human refugees with open arms. They provided food, medical care, and new homes on several different worlds. The humans seemed grateful and worked hard to integrate into galactic society. What happened next? Colonel Chen asked. The holographic scene fast-forwarded several decades. Elena saw human communities thriving on Alliance worlds. Human children played with alien children. Human scientists worked alongside alien researchers. Everything seemed peaceful and positive. The predecessors initially adapted well to Alliance society, the computer said. They were intelligent, creative, and eager to contribute. However, Alliance policies regarding new species required them to undergo gradual integration processes. Dr. Tanaka leaned forward. What kind of integration processes? The scene changed to show humans in what appeared to be educational facilities, but as Elena watched more closely, she realized these were not schools. They were conditioning centers. Alliance policy required all potentially aggressive species to undergo behavioral modification, the computer explained. The predecessors were subjected to treatments designed to reduce their competitive instincts and territorial behaviors. Elena felt her stomach turn as she watched humans being subjected to procedures that looked more like torture than education. They were forced to take drugs that altered their brain chemistry. They were exposed to psychological conditioning designed to make them passive and submissive. They were trying to change what made humans human, Lieutenant Walsh said quietly. The Alliance believed they were helping, Keithfar said sadly. They had long ago modified themselves to remove aggressive tendencies. They thought they were giving the predecessors the gift of peaceful existence. The holographic display showed the results of these treatments. Many humans became docile and cooperative, but others began to show signs of severe psychological damage. Some went insane. Others became violent in unpredictable ways. The treatments had unexpected side effects, the computer continued. Rather than reducing aggression, they seemed to concentrate and redirect it. Those predecessors who retained their sanity became more violent than any species the Alliance had ever encountered. Elena watched in horror as the scene shifted to show the first attacks. Small groups of humans began targeting Alliance facilities, but their methods were unlike anything the peaceful aliens had ever seen. They did not just destroy buildings or kill enemies. They seemed to understand exactly how to cause maximum psychological damage to their victims. The Alliance had no experience dealing with this type of warfare, the computer said. They had not fought a real war in over 10,000 years. They did not understand that the predecessors were not just angry about their treatment. They were actively trying to drive the Alliance species insane. The holographic recreation became more difficult to watch. Elena saw humans using captured Alliance members in experiments designed to discover their worst fears. They would then use that information to terrorize entire populations. Why did they not just try to negotiate? Dr. Tanaka asked. Kethvar's light patterns shifted to deep sadness. They did try, multiple times. But every attempt at peace talks ended in disaster. The predecessors would agree to meet, then use the meetings to gather intelligence about Alliance psychology. They were learning how to hurt entire species in ways no one had ever imagined. The scene showed the gradual collapse of Alliance civilization. As more worlds fell to predecessor attacks, the surviving species became increasingly desperate. They began creating weapons of mass destruction, something they had not done in millennia. The final phase of the war lasted 300 years, the computer narrated. By the end, both sides had weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The death toll reached into the trillions. Elena watched as the holographic display showed the final battle. Alliance forces had finally managed to push the predecessors back to their home system, but the cost had been enormous. Entire species had been driven extinct. Whole civilizations had collapsed into madness. The survivors built the containment barrier around the Sol system, the computer concluded. But they also made a vow. If humans ever returned to the galaxy, they would either be kept peaceful through appeasement, or they would be destroyed, completely. The holographic display shut down, leaving the humans standing in darkness. Now you know, Kethvar said. The predecessors were not evil by nature. They became evil because the Alliance tried to change them. But the result was the same. They nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy. Elena felt overwhelmed by what she had learned. So you think we will do the same thing? That we will become like them if you do not keep us happy? We hope that by treating you with respect and giving you what you want, you will never experience the trauma that drove the predecessors to madness, Kethvar replied. But we also know that modern humans show even higher levels of natural aggression than your ancestors did. Colonel Chen was studying the weapon displays on the walls. What if we do not want to be kept like pets in a golden cage? What if we want real freedom and equality in galactic society? Kethvar's entire body went dark for several seconds. Then we would have to consider whether you are becoming a threat that requires more direct intervention. Dr. Tanaka looked at her teammates. Are you saying that if we demand to be treated as equals rather than as dangerous animals that need to be appeased, you would consider that grounds for eliminating our entire species? The preservation protocol is very clear, Kethvar said. Any sign that humans are reverting to predecessor behaviors must be stopped by any means necessary. Elena realized the terrible trap they were in. If humans accepted being... Word of the humans' visit to the Archive of Sorrows spread quickly through Nexus Prime. Elena could feel the change in atmosphere immediately. Where before the aliens had been nervously polite, now they seemed genuinely terrified. Conversations stopped completely when humans approached. Several species requested immediate transfers to other sections of the station. The situation is becoming unstable, Kethvar warned during an emergency meeting. Many council members believe that showing you the true history was a mistake. They think it might trigger the same response that the predecessors had. Elena looked around their luxury quarters, which now felt more like a prison than ever. What kind of response? Knowledge of how your ancestors were treated has made some species panic. They are afraid you will seek revenge for what the Alliance did to the predecessors. Colonel Chen was monitoring security feeds on Lieutenant Walsh's equipment. I count over 200 guards in this section now. Yesterday there were maybe 30. They are preparing for something. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her research tablet. I have been analyzing the genetic data they provided about the predecessors. There is something they are not telling us about the behavioral modification procedures. What do you mean? Elena asked. The treatments the Alliance used were not just designed to reduce aggression. They were specifically designed to break the human spirit. They targeted the parts of the brain responsible for hope, creativity, and the ability to form emotional bonds. The Alliance was not just trying to make humans peaceful, they were trying to make them into empty shells. Elena felt sick, and when that did not work, the humans who survived went insane with rage. Worse than that, Dr. Tanaka continued. According to this data, the Alliance knew the treatments were causing psychological damage. They had reports from their own scientists warning that the procedures were torture, not therapy, but they continued anyway because they believed humans were too dangerous in their natural state. Lieutenant Walsh suddenly looked up from her communication station. We have a problem. I am detecting multiple fleets approaching Nexus Prime, big ones. Kethvar's crystal body began flashing rapid warning patterns. The Korgoth hegemony. They are one of the few remaining militant species in the galaxy. They have been arguing for years that the preservation protocol is too dangerous. What do they want? Elena asked. They want humanity destroyed before you can become another predecessor threat, Kethvar said. They believe the only safe approach is to eliminate your entire species now, while you are still contained to one star system. Colonel Chen was studying tactical displays. How many ships are we talking about? Over 500 warships, Lieutenant Walsh reported. This is not a diplomatic mission. This is an invasion fleet. Within hours, the situation on Nexus Prime became chaotic. Emergency alarms sounded throughout the station. Alien species began evacuating to emergency shelters. The human delegation found themselves surrounded by even more guards. But now Elena was not sure if the guards were there to protect them or to keep them from escaping. High Chancellor Zixthul summoned all council members to an emergency session. The humans were brought to the chamber under heavy guard and placed in what was obviously a defendant's dock, rather than a diplomatic seating area. The Korgoth fleet has issued an ultimatum, the Chancellor announced to the packed chamber. They demand that humanity be declared an immediate threat to galactic security. They want authorization to sterilize the Sol system and eliminate the human species completely. Elena stood up. We have done nothing to threaten anyone. We have been cooperating with all your protocols and restrictions. A massive reptilian being rose from the Korgoth delegation. The predecessors also seemed peaceful at first. They waited decades before beginning their campaign of extinction. We will not make the same mistake our ancestors did. But we are not the predecessors, Elena argued. We are a different people living 50,000 years later. You share their genetics, their homeworld, and their violent history, the Korgoth commander replied. Your own planet's records show constant warfare, genocide, and cruelty spanning your entire civilization. How are you different from your ancestors? Elena felt the weight of human history pressing down on her. Everything the Korgoth said was true. Humans did have a long history of violence and war. Dr. Tanaka stood up beside Elena. We are different because we learned from our mistakes. Human civilization has evolved beyond its violent past. Have you? Another council member asked. Your species still maintains weapons capable of destroying your world. You still have conflicts and wars. You still show the same aggressive patterns that made the predecessors so dangerous. Colonel Chen rose to his feet. Every species has the capacity for violence. What matters is whether we choose to use it. The predecessors also talked about choice, the Korgoth commander said, right up until they chose to begin exterminating entire civilizations. High Chancellor Zixthul raised several tentacles for silence. The Council has been debating this issue for decades. Some believe humanity should be granted full freedom and membership. Others believe they should be contained indefinitely. Still others believe they should be eliminated before they can become a threat. Elena felt desperate. There has to be some way to prove that we are not like the predecessors. Some test or demonstration that would show we have evolved beyond our violent past. The Chancellor's massive eyes focused on her. There is one possibility, But it would be extremely dangerous, and failure would result in the immediate elimination of your entire species. What kind of test? Elena asked. Kethvar's light patterns became rapid and agitated. They are talking about the predecessor simulation. It is a recreation of the exact conditions that drove your ancestors to madness. If modern humans can endure what the predecessors could not, it would prove you have truly evolved. Colonel Chen understood the implications immediately. And if we fail the test? Then the Korgoth fleet would have authorization to destroy Earth and every human colony ship that might exist, the Chancellor said. The test would prove that humanity is indeed destined to become another predecessor threat. Elena looked at her team. Dr. Tanaka was pale, but determined. Lieutenant Walsh looked scared, but nodded when Elena caught her eye. Colonel Chen straightened his shoulders and gave a slight military nod. What exactly would this test involve? Elena asked. You would be subjected to the same psychological and physical treatments that broke the predecessors, the Chancellor explained. The same attempts to strip away your humanity, to break your spirit, to reduce you to empty shells. If you can endure this without becoming violent, it would demonstrate that modern humans have evolved beyond their ancestors' limitations. And if we break, if we become violent or seek revenge, the Korgoth commander's reptilian features showed what might have been a smile. Then we would have proof that humans are indeed too dangerous to exist. The sterilization of Earth would begin immediately. Elena felt the enormity of the decision before them. Accept the test and risk the extinction of humanity if they failed. Refuse the test and face immediate destruction anyway. How long do we have to decide? She asked. The Korgoth fleet will reach weapons range of Nexus Prime in 72 hours, the Chancellor said. If humanity has not agreed to undergo the test by then, they will interpret your refusal as an admission of guilt and act accordingly. Elena looked around the chamber at thousands of alien faces, most showing fear, some showing anger, a few showing what might have been sympathy. We need time to discuss this as a team, she said finally. Of course, the Chancellor replied. But understand that the stakes could not be higher. The survival of your entire species depends on proving that you are not your ancestors. As the guards escorted them back to their quarters, Elena realized they were not just facing a test of human endurance. They were facing a test of everything that made humanity worth preserving in the first place. The question was not whether they could survive what had broken the predecessors. The question was whether they could survive it while remaining human. The next 72 hours would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community as equals, or whether the human story ended forever among the stars. Helena sat with her team in their quarters as the countdown to the Korgoth ultimatum continued. 68 hours remained. Outside their windows they could see the growing fleet of warships taking positions around Nexus Prime. We have to take the test, Dr. Tanaka said quietly. It is our only chance to save humanity. But what if we fail? Lieutenant Walsh asked. What if we break the same way the predecessors did? Colonel Chen was studying the tactical situation on his displays. If we do not take the test, the Korgoth fleet will destroy Earth anyway. At least this way we have a fighting chance. Elena had been thinking about everything they had learned. Something about the predecessor's story bothered her, but she could not figure out what it was. Dr. Tanaka, you said the Alliance treatments were designed to break the human spirit. But what exactly did the predecessors do when they finally snapped? According to the records, they began a campaign of systematic revenge against every Alliance species. They targeted civilians, destroyed cultural sites, and used psychological warfare to drive entire populations insane. But why those specific tactics? Elena pressed. Why did they choose to cause psychological damage rather than just military conquest? Dr. Tanaka paused, then her eyes widened. Because that is exactly what had been done to them. They were not just being violent. They were giving the Alliance a taste of their own medicine. Elena felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together. The predecessors were not evil monsters. They were victims who became so broken by their treatment that they decided to inflict the same suffering on their torturers. Which means, Colonel Chen said slowly, The test is designed to break us the same way. They want to see if we will seek revenge when we are tortured and humiliated. Lieutenant Walsh looked up from her communication equipment. But what if we do not seek revenge? What if we choose a different response? Elena stood up suddenly. That is it. That is the real test. Not whether we can endure what the predecessors endured, but whether we can respond differently than they did. The next morning, Elena requested a meeting with the High Chancellor and the Council. When they were brought to the chamber, she noticed that the Korgoth delegation had grown larger and more aggressive-looking. "We have made our decision," Elena announced. "Humanity accepts the test." The Chancellor's tentacles moved in what might have been surprise. "You understand the consequences of failure?" "We understand," Elena said, "but we want to make one modification to the test conditions." The Korgoth commander hissed angrily. "You do not get to negotiate the terms. You either accept the test as designed or face immediate destruction." Elena ignored the Korgoth and addressed the Chancellor directly. "We want the test to be conducted publicly, with full transparency. Every species in the galaxy should be able to observe what happens." "Why?" the Chancellor asked. "Because the real lesson of the predecessors is not about human nature. It is about what happens when fear and prejudice drive people to treat others as less than human. The galaxy needs to see what you are doing to us, and they need to see how we respond." Kethavar's crystal body flickered with rapid light patterns. "That is a dangerous request. If you fail publicly, it will confirm every species' worst fears about humanity. And if we succeed," Elena replied, "it will prove that the cycle of fear and revenge can be broken." The test began 3 days later. Elena and her team were placed in individual isolation chambers designed to recreate the psychological torture that had driven the predecessors to madness. The process was broadcast live to every member of the Galactic Council and transmitted to homeworlds across the galaxy. Elena found herself in a white room with no windows, no furniture, and no way to measure the passage of time. Speakers hidden in the walls began playing sounds designed to cause maximum psychological distress. Images of Earth being destroyed were projected on the walls. Voices told her over and over that humans were inferior, violent, and unworthy of life. The treatment continued for what felt like days. Elena lost track of time completely. The voices became constant, telling her that her friends were dead, that her species was doomed, that resistance was futile. The images showed her family members being tortured and killed in graphic detail. But Elena had one advantage the predecessors had not possessed. She knew this was a test. She knew the images were fake, the voices were lies, and the torture would eventually end. More importantly, she understood the real purpose of the test. When the physical torture began, Elena focused on a simple truth. The beings hurting her were afraid. They were so terrified of what humans might become that they were willing to torture innocent people to prevent it. The predecessors had responded to this fear with rage and revenge. Elena chose to respond with something else entirely: compassion. On the 5th day of testing, something unexpected happened. Elena began talking to her torturers. "I know you are afraid of us," she said to the empty room, knowing that her words were being broadcast across the galaxy. "I know you remember what the predecessors did, and you are terrified that we will do the same thing." The torture continued, but Elena kept talking. "But I want you to understand something. The predecessors were not evil because they were human. They became evil because you broke them. You took away their hope, their dignity, and their humanity. And when they finally snapped, they gave you back exactly what you had given them." The voices in the speakers became louder, more insistent, telling her to shut up, to accept her punishment, to acknowledge human inferiority. Elena continued anyway. "We are not the predecessors. We are their descendants, but we have learned something they never had the chance to learn. We have learned that the cycle of fear and revenge can be broken. We choose to break it." On the 7th day, Elena did something that shocked the entire galaxy. She forgave her torturers. "I forgive you," she said simply. "I forgive you for the fear that drives you to hurt innocent people. I forgive you for the prejudice that makes you judge us by our ancestors' actions. I forgive you for the pain you have caused because I understand that it comes from your own trauma." The torture stopped. In the other chambers, her teammates had followed Elena's example. Dr. Tanaka had spent her time analyzing the psychological patterns of her torturers and offering suggestions for healing their trauma. Colonel Chen had endured every physical assault without retaliation, instead talking about the honor and duty that came with strength. Lieutenant Walsh had used her technical skills to turn the communication systems into a platform for broadcasting messages of hope to the galaxy. When the test ended, the council chamber was silent. Elena and her team stood before thousands of alien representatives, battered and exhausted but unbroken. High Chancellor Zixthul was the first to speak. In 50,000 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever responded to that level of systematic torture with forgiveness. The Korgoth commander seemed stunned. This changes nothing. They could still become violent later. This could all be an act. Elena looked directly at the Korgoth delegation. You are right. We could become violent. Every species has that potential. But that is not what makes us dangerous or safe. What matters is that we choose not to be violent, even when we have every reason to seek revenge. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. The real lesson of the predecessors is not about human genetics or human nature. It is about what happens when a civilization chooses fear over understanding, control over trust, and revenge over forgiveness. Elena addressed the entire council. The galactic law that shields humans should not exist to protect you from us. It should exist to remind the galaxy never again to create the conditions that broke the predecessors. Because any species, when pushed beyond their limits and stripped of their dignity, could become what our ancestors became. Colonel Chen's voice was quiet but strong. We offer ourselves not as pets to be appeased or weapons to be feared, but as partners in building a galaxy where no species ever again faces the choice between slavery and revenge. The vote was not even close. Species after species stood to welcome humanity as full equals in the galactic community. Even some members of the Korgoth delegation voted in favor, acknowledging that they had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. But the most important change was not in the law books or the council records. It was in the understanding that spread across the galaxy. True strength was not the ability to inflict suffering on others, but the ability to endure suffering without becoming what you fought against. Elena stood at the window of her new office, in the Galactic Council headquarters, watching ships from 100 different worlds working together on construction projects. In the 6 months since the test, humanity had been granted not just membership but leadership roles in galactic peacekeeping efforts. They were not feared for their capacity for violence. They were respected for their capacity to choose mercy over revenge, understanding over fear, and forgiveness over hatred. The humans had not just passed the test, they had redefined what the test meant. Colonel Chen entered her office carrying a data pad. The first class of alien students has arrived for combat training. Elena smiled. Are they learning how to fight? No, Chen replied. They are learning how not to fight. How to be strong enough to choose peace from a